Okay, hello, good afternoon. Umrao, for people who are working with Umrao, Umrao will be giving back essays at the end of this class. And for people working with Antonia, you should have your essay back by email by midnight tonight. Any questions about that? Okay. I'm told it's Ellie's birthday today. Happy birthday, Ellie! Okay. On that cheerful note, so one last time on Laurie Paul on a transformative experience. So today we're looking at chapter 4 of Laurie Paul's book. It occurred to me, the book is reasonably short, and I hope you think reasonably accessible. Is that your experience? Yeah. So you have chapters 1 to 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 4 on B-Space. Would it be useful if I put the third chapter on? It's just, I don't think you need to read it. The core is these other chapters, but the third chapter has got lots of interesting examples in it. Maybe I'll put it on B-Space anyhow, and you don't have to look at it. You can look at it if you like. Is that the way to do it? Okay. Next time we'll be looking at an old paper by Martin and Deutscher called Remembering. So one way to think of what we're doing here is we spent a lot of time in the first part of the class thinking about the importance of imaginative understanding in knowledge of the mind. Right, that was the bats and the split brain and Mary and all that. Jaspers. What we've been doing with the Laurie Paul stuff, we're looking at imaginative understanding not in relation to other people, but in relation to your own future self. So it's a natural next question to ask, well, what about imaginative understanding in your knowledge of your own past self? So looking at imaginative understanding, not as it connects you to other people, but as it connects your present self to your future self and to your past self. And remembering what happened to you in the past is the natural way to begin on thinking about your imaginative understanding of your past self. Isn't that what memory is? When you reimagine the past, your own past. Then after that we'll go on to look at how these things connect to the identity of the self. What makes you the same person now as you when you were 5 years old? What makes you the same person now as the person when you're retiring? Okay, so that's the plan. That's where we've been, where we're going, what we're doing. So let's start out with something about imaginative choosing, which is like the central topic of the Laurie Paul book. I think, let me just say, this is a brand new book. I'm only reading this for the first time. I think my interpretation of what's going on here is correct, but you let me know if you don't think I got it right. I really may not have got it right in key points. But my interpretation of what's going on is there are two things she's got to do. One is to establish how important imaginative understanding is in your own personal decision-making. That it's imaginative understanding that's very important, as opposed to letting scientists decide what's best for you, letting people say, letting people manage you, letting people tell you paternalistically what's the right way to go. And as with Nagel on Bats or Jackson's Mary, the way she's bringing out the importance of imagination is in highlighting cases where you can't do the imaginative reasoning, where you can't do the imaginative thinking, and saying in these cases we face real quandaries about how to make decisions as to what to do with our lives. So the first thing she has to do is establish the importance of imaginative thinking and decision making. So what is the answer here? Why does imaginative choosing matter? What's the right way to answer that? She doesn't actually at any point give this answer explicitly, because only imaginative decision-making, only imagination gives you access to your own future mental states. But I think my reading is that in a subliminal kind of way, that's running through the entire book. For Nagel and Jackson, that was the important thing about imagination. Imagination is what gives you access to the mental states of other people or other animals. If you don't have the imaginative access, you don't know anything about the mental life. So if you brought that model to bear on all her examples, then the reason imaginative understanding matters is that's what will give you access to your own future mental states. If you can't imagine what life will be like for you as a student at Berkeley, or as a consultant to a tech firm, or whatever it is you want to do, then your decision making is impaired because you don't know about your own mental states. What I was suggesting last time is that's not a great answer to the question. It can seem very important, and I think when you go through the way Paul treats her examples, it seems like that really is what she's talking about. But that would mean that you're making your choices about the future based only, if you're using imaginative reasoning, it would mean you are basing your choices as to what to do in the future only on your assessment of what your own future mental state will be like. Will it hurt? Will I like it? Will it be fun? That kind of thing. And that was the whole thing about last time, about whether what you're doing makes a difference in the real world. For most of us, what kind of real world things are going on, will be going on, is really important to you choosing to do one thing rather than another. We just don't usually make decisions based only on what it's going to be like for me in here. That otherwise you wouldn't have any reason to stay out of an experience machine. Yeah, if all you care about is what's going on in here, well, if I get what's going on in here right, the rest of you can go and fry yourself. That's all I care about. And my point was actually relatively few of us really think that way. Most people care a lot about what's going on with the other people in their lives and so on. So I think we need a conception of imagination-based choosing. I think there's something very intuitive about what she's doing here. I think this is an important book because she really is onto something that actually matters for people every day. And we all feel this puzzlement when we come to making these big life choices. You think, how am I going to choose? And you hop, and you hope for the best, and you try to make the best of whatever decision you saddle yourself with. And you never know whether things will come out better another way. This is a confusion that all of us feel at some points. And to try and get clear about this really seems worthwhile. I mean, in a way, there isn't really anything more important you do than make these big life choices. But when we're thinking about imaginative reasoning, then we shouldn't be thinking of it as something that just relates to your own mental states. You've got to be encompassing bits of the real world. If your big plan is to make all these beautiful gardens, then that has to be something you can include in imaginative reasoning. If what difference you make to other people, if you want to do something for other people, then that has to be something that you can imaginatively reason about. And also, I think Paul really downplays this in her book, but if imaginative reasoning is going to be something that you can take seriously at all, it's got to be something that can factor in scientific data. She constantly presents it as if either you project yourself into your own future life and you figure how that will be, or else you use scientific data. Using the scientific data is a really weird way to do your decisions. If you want to be authentic, you should do it on the basis of imaginative reasoning. So here's an example we looked at a couple of times. This is a good example because it's so, most people have to make this choice at some point about whether to have a child. Across the board, while the highs seem to be higher for parents, the lows seem to be lower. Many measures suggest that parents with children in the home, especially mothers of young children, have lower levels of subjective well-being. That's the scientific data. Moreover, individuals who've never had children report similar levels of life satisfaction as individuals with grown children who've left home. So the scientific data is suggesting that maybe you shouldn't have children. Your level of subjective well-being will be higher if you don't have children. But of course, that's not what happens. And she says, imagine Sally, who's always believed that having a child would bring her happiness and fulfillment, deciding not to have a child simply because the empirical evidence tells her she will maximize her expected value by remaining childless. For her to choose this way, ignoring her subjective preferences, relying solely on the scientific data, relying solely on the external reasons, that seems bizarre. Now, there's obviously something right about that. If you're really caught by the picture of yourself with a family, then the scientists can say what they like. That's what's going to captivate you. That's what's going to make you do the thing. But there are two things about this analysis here. One is the thing I highlighted last time. Thinking of having a child entirely in terms of what will bring you happiness and fulfillment seems a little bit crazy. I mean, the idea would be you're bringing happiness and fulfillment to other people, and the imaginative understanding shouldn't just involve what's going to be happening to you. The other thing is that this way of framing the decision is actually extremely, what's the word I want? I can hear educators all over the country throwing up their hands when they see this. And consider this example. Imagine Barry, who's always believed that the use of dangerous drugs would bring him happiness and fulfillment. From quite a young age, that's what Barry really has wanted to do. He imagines living the life. He imagines how great it will be from the inside. He says, put yourself in the shoes of one of these guys. Wouldn't that be grand? What a whale of a time. And so deciding not to take dangerous drugs, just because the empirical evidence tells you that you'll maximize your expected value by remaining drug-free, well, to choose that way, ignoring your subjective preferences and relying solely on external reasons, that seems bizarre. Whoa. That can't be the right answer, can it? Put up your hand if you think that's the right answer. I'm just curious. Right. Okay, does anyone want to speak to that? I mean, that would be bizarre. That Barry shouldn't reason like that. I mean, people are telling him, look, people who make extensive use of recreational drugs at the weekend are highly liable to midweek depression, lose their jobs, lose their families, lose love, end up dying in an inglorious mixture of vomit and alcohol at the bottom of a staircase. But that's just the empirical data. Who cares about the scientific data? What I'm interested in is imaginative understanding. Is that the right? That can't be the right way to. Surely that's not the right way to reason. Yeah. 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 Right. Right. No, I think that's absolutely right. I think that something like this reasoning really is what catches people. You know, that's what captivates you. That's what moves you, and you ignore the empirical data. But it can't be the right way to... surely that's not the right answer. You see what I mean? Right. Yeah. I think that's part of what's so interesting about this. This is real life. These are the decisions people actually make on these kind of bases. And so it's good to try and pan back and think explicitly about what's going on here. And the thing is extremely confusing. I mean, it's confusing for people in making their everyday life decisions. Yeah, you stay alcohol-free your whole life, and you still might be caught by, well, maybe it would have been great. You see what I mean? These are real quandaries that people get into. Yeah. I think we're going to raise a question about that. Oh, okay. Anyone else on that? So you see that this is just the same thing as what Paul was saying about that case. Yeah. So we have to have, but I mean, what she's saying about the case of having a child really seems pretty plausible. But why is that? Why does it seem good in this case, but not in this case? Anyone? Yep. The subjective value that we assign to each experience. Okay, but say a bit more. What subjective value? Which experiences? Yep. Changing and positive. Yeah. Right. They're just going to ruin you. Okay. So your imaginative understanding of what it's going to be like is pretty bad in the case of the drugs, is that right? But not in the case of the child. Yeah, I guess that's true for many people. I think it's not always true. I mean, what the last person was saying was to people who do take a lot of alcohol or whatever, that's just not how it seems to them. They think this is what I really value. Yeah. I guess what gets me is that you want to be able to say, look at the data, which is basically one part of what you're saying. Yeah. But if you can say, look at the data in this case, why can't you say, in this case, you can say, look at the data. Why can't you say to someone who's thinking of having a child, don't be absurd, look at the data. You see what I mean? You're going to be happier if you don't have a child. Don't do it. Just say no. Yeah? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. There's something to say about that, yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, so there is that idea of the rational alcoholic. I just really value getting drunk. Nothing else seems particularly important. Yeah. If I die early, well, there you go. Just one more grave among the hills. I mean, I'm not, just to be very clear, I'm not recommending this, but I think it's good to think explicitly about the kinds of reasoning that are going on here. Yeah. Yes. Right. That's true. It's a cheat and a simplification in what I'm doing, yeah. Because I think the prognosis for someone taking dangerous drugs is much worse than the prognosis for someone taking having a child, taking children. If you see what I mean, yeah. Yeah. So that's true. There is that contrast. Anything else on that? I think the key point I want to get here is just whatever it is that's going on in imagination-based reasoning, if you're imagining whether to have a child, if you're deciding, making any of these big choices, it has to be something that even if it's imaginative, even if it's authentic, if it's something done from your own point of view, and you're imagining what it'll be like in the future, it's got to be something that can be informed by the scientific data. It's just a mistake to think imagination is over here, the science is over there, and I either do it this way and get something authentic, or I use the science and I get something that's not authentic. That can't be the right contrast. It must be possible to have the scientific data inform your choice. Yeah? So it isn't either or, either science or imagination. Yes, yes. What if you ignore the data? Well, I guess that's my point, really. That way lies disaster. You see what I mean? I mean, I've always wanted to drive down the freeway at 150, and finally I got a car that'll do it. You know, okay, ignore the data. Right? What care I about data? I'm going to be authentic. Surely, you know, that just couldn't be the right thing to do. Yeah? Yeah? Yes. Sorry? Right, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Of course there are. And the question is, ought you not to be using the data? Ought you, if you have the data, ought you not to reckon it in? I mean, I guess what's concerning me is that I think in the book there's this contrast between using the data and reasoning imaginatively. Yeah? And I think if a reasoning imaginatively is going to be a rational way to make choices, it's got to be something that can use data. Yeah? It mustn't be that if you're reasoning imaginatively, you've thereby got to say, I'm not going to make use of scientific data. Yeah? You must be able to use the scientific data. Otherwise, it's just crazy. Yeah? 1, 2. Yep. Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, that could happen, but yeah, that could happen either way, couldn't it? I mean, I agree that imaginative thinking can really catch you and make you move in a way that the data seems like some boring facts. Yes, something like that. It could also happen round the other way. It could be that I just don't have the nerve to go in the face of the facts and live my dreams, and that could be a failure of rationality too. But I guess aren't these both failures of rationality when you do that? Yeah. Antonio? Yes, right. What we actually do, yeah. I guess it's somewhat uneasily a bit of both. You know, it's trying to be faithful to what we're not trying to describe what some ideal mathematician who wasn't a bit like you or me would do. So it's got to be grounded in what we actually do, but trying to describe it in a way that makes it clear what we ought to be doing. Yeah, something like that. Or let's think more lucidly about what really we ought to be doing. Because I think all of us find these big choices very confusing. I mean, surely I'm not alone in that, right? But, yeah. At least one of them should be one. Yeah. Is what? Is it? Oh, ethics. Was this ethics? Yes. Why not? Yeah, I mean, in philosophy of mind is really the foundation of the whole subject. So if you're doing ethics, you better have done some philosophy of mind. I think that's the basic point. Okay? Okay. Look, here is another example of the Laurie Pauls. Here is a durian. I don't know, how many of you guys know about durians? Wow. Okay. I never heard of durians until I read the book. Okay. How many of you have actually tasted durians? Jesus. Okay. The next 10 minutes of the lecture are completely beside the point. I thought it was a strange exotic fruit. Can you get them in a supermarket? No? Okay. Put up your hand if you had a durian and liked it. And if you didn't, put up your hand if you had a durian and strongly liked it. Strongly disliked? Okay. That's interesting. Okay. Well, okay, these travel, not for the first time actually in this class. You guys know far more about the topic than I do. But just since obviously many of you are like me and haven't had this thing, here's the I thought I'd check what Laurie said about this. So here's Wikipedia. The edible flesh emits a distinctive odor that is strong and penetrating even when the husk is intact. Some people regard the durian as having a pleasantly sweet fragrance. Others find the aroma overpowering and revolting. The smell evokes reactions from deep appreciation to disgust, intense disgust, and has been described variously as rotten onions, turpentine, and raw sewage. The persistence of its odor has led to the fruit's banishment from certain hotels and public transportation in Southeast Asia. Okay, there's a rhapsodic description here from Alfred Russel Wallace, who obviously quite liked it. A rich custard highly flavoured with almonds gives the best general idea of it, but there are occasional wafts of flavour that call to mind cream cheese, onion sauce, sherry wine, and other incongruous dishes. To eat durians is a new sensation worth a voyage to the east to experience. As producing a food of the most exquisite flavour, it is unsurpassed. There are other opinions. To eat it seems to be the sacrifice of self-respect. On first tasting it, I thought it like the flesh of some animal in a state of putrefaction. Okay, so there you are. Okay, so it's your choice, right? You have to make this choice. Suppose you're like me, you never even heard of this stuff until today. Should you choose it? Well, that's a clear case of what Paul's describing. What you want to do is imagine what it will be like to eat the thing. But you can't do that. So do you have any rational basis on which to choose whether or not you eat it? Well, in a way, this is the denouement of the book. This is what happens in chapter 4, where she tries to describe a way in which you could rationally choose, make a choice as to whether or not to eat durian, even though in trying to imagine what it's like, you've just hit this blank wall. You have no idea. Actually, I would quite like... How many of you guys know durian well? Did you really like it? Was it awful? We first pity, then endure, and then embrace. Okay. Well, I'm very curious, right? Okay, no, but okay. I guess my own reactions actually illustrate her next point, because now I'm thinking I've got to do this. She says, instead of constructing the decision in terms of whether you will enjoy the taste of durian or whether you will find it revolting, you can choose to try durian based on whether you want to have a new experience for its own sake. That is, solely for the sake of the value of having the experience, whether what it's like to have that experience is subjectively good or bad. And I must admit, after all you guys say you've tried it, I now feel, okay, I've got to get hold of it. For better or worse, I want to know. And that's the idea here. That is, you decide to try a durian for the sake of the revelation the experience of tasting a new kind of food brings. Okay, so the idea is when you get one of these transformative experiences, you learn something. That's revelation. When Mary steps out from her black and white room, the question we had was, will she learn anything? And we said, sure, she's going to learn something. So that's a moment of revelation. She might like it, she might not like it. it doesn't really matter. She's got something good now. She knows about something she didn't know about before. That's revelation. That was worth it, because now I know. And so you might raise and say, I mean, those of us who haven't tasted durian are like Mary, right? We've been in our durian-free environment all our lives. We've read what we can about durians, but we haven't got the key thing. We haven't had that moment of revelation when we stepped into the world of the durian eater, for better or worse. I guess one kind of question about that is, what kind of revelation is it you're getting? I mean, in the case of Mary, is she getting facts about the outside world, or is she getting facts about experience? And remember, there's that basic question about imagination running through it. Is imagination really all about your own mind, or is it about the world outside you? I guess all I want to say about this really is that we shouldn't assume that revelation has to be all about your own experiences. You could be thinking, now I know what durians are like, or you could be thinking, now I know what it's like to taste durians. These are different things. Or you could be thinking, now I know what the colors of objects are. Or you could be thinking, now I know what it's like to experience the color of an object. These are different things. And it seems to me just as valid to say, I would value this knowledge of the outside world very greatly. I really want to know about the things out there. That's why I'm going to choose this transformative experience. Whether it's a positive experience or a negative experience, I want to learn about the world outside. But I think that sounds quite good for the case of durian, right? You know, that kind of, yeah?
I feel like you're getting to be a parent based off of like what you're going to learn from it, off of experience,
I agree. It seems absolutely crazy. I just wanted to see what it would be like. Really? Yeah. What would it be like being a drug addict? Well, I just wondered, you know. I mean, I don't think, yeah. The one you experience the action of. Yeah, right. That's right, but if you were choosing based on the revelation, as the last commenter said, is something that will go on for 18 years. Yeah, that's a lot of revelation. If after a bit you think, well, that's enough revelation. Yeah. And as I say, I think Laurie Paul is not actually explicitly recommending this, but she does test it out. I mean, remember that vampire example, which is kind of a model for children? With becoming a vampire, the sort of revelation we'd be interested in wouldn't be just the sort of information we gain from having a brief new experience, like trying a durian or seeing a new color. So this is like your point. Instead, we'd be interested in the sort of revelation that comes from experiencing a new way of living our lives, that is, from experiencing what it'd be like to live life as a vampire. The sort of revelation involved then isn't merely sensory, but rather the kind of revelation we discussed, where we explored the idea that there was a revelation involved in living one's life as a parent that is not represented by the standard interpretations of the empirical work on well-being and parenthood. So the idea there is, if you consider this kind of scientific study kind of data on the highs and lows of parenting, then she's saying that kind of study misses out something. People who parent learn something new. so is missed out by that idea. But I take it your point was, however much you value revelation, it's hard to see how you could value it highly enough here. But just finding out for the sake of it is really going to be worth it. Yeah, is that right? Yeah. I just strongly agree with that. I can't really see that. But she presses this idea even further. If we act for the sake of this sort of revelation, the revelation associated with lived experience, and if we have the right kind of previous experience with making radically new discoveries about our lives, perhaps we could assign subjective values to the revelatory experience of discovering what it's like to live life as a vampire. So if you just look at the scientific data, you say on this side there's a high and this side there's a low, then you put the revelation into the scales, maybe that could tip it. There's a certain beautiful logic to her argument here, because in the Mary case, the key thing is, it's easy to feel the key thing is, you're going to learn something. In the Durian case, I feel that very powerfully. I'd really like to know. And that actually outweighs the possibility of it being bad. Yeah, I mean, what do you think, you guys who tried it and didn't like it? Should I do it? Yeah, I should do it. You see, it's worth knowing, right? Even if the outcome is bad, it's worth knowing. That has a value in itself. But pressing it so hard. Yeah. As the decision becomes more permanent, yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Because you can't undo. That's it for good. Yeah. It's not suck it and see. You're just trapped forever. Yeah. And in the case of the vampire, there's that further thing that you've got your own present values, right? Let's suppose that what you care about right now is being a loyal and valued friend, that what you care about is your family. Once you become a vampire, all that stuff goes out of the window, right? I mean, vampires don't really care about, let's suppose, about lasting loyal friendships. Well, all right. What would make you rationally decide to become a vampire if it means having all your preferences changed? I mean, you could say, well, but then I wouldn't be a loyal and valued friend. But of course, I wouldn't care a bit about being a loyal and valued friend at that point. And sometimes that doesn't matter. I mean, if you suppose that what you really care about is going to nice restaurants and seeing agreeable concerts at the theatre, and you think, well, when I'm a parent, goodbye to all that. And then you think, yeah, but maybe I won't care about all that. Well, how should you think about the decision? Should you think, well, therefore I'm not going to do it, or therefore that doesn't matter in making my choice? These are just confusing things in everyday life. So when I become a vampire, all my preferences are going to change. Well, here's Laurie Paul again. The experience of becoming a vampire changes your core personal preferences, making you into a different kind of conscious being. So how are you to make a decision in this point if you don't even understand what the new preferences will be? Well, she says, maybe revelation can still save us. It's just that you push the level higher. What you're discovering now is not just what the taste of durian is, or what it's like to live with a newborn child. You are going to discover what it's like to have all these new preferences. If you choose to avoid the transformative experience, then you must prefer to discover... Wait a minute, I'm sorry, this doesn't make sense. Okay, let me read this one, which does make sense. If you choose to avoid the transformative experience, then to choose rationally, you must prefer not to discover how and whether your preferences will change. Right? If I choose not to taste the durian, that means I'm preferring not to discover what it's like. If I choose not to become transformed into a vampire with a vampire's preferences, that means I'm choosing not to discover what a vampire's preferences will be. But if I do choose to become a vampire, then I'll get that revelation of discovering what core preferences I end up having. I'll discover what values vampires put on things. So it's not that you can't make big life choices rationally, nor that rational agents can't choose from the first-person perspective. It's rather, when you've got these transformative experiences where you don't know what they're going to be or what they're going to lead to, then one way to make the rational choice is to do it based on whether or not you want the revelation, whether or not you value that revelation highly. Or, on the other hand, you've got to find some way to think imaginatively about how you'd choose between having the durian or not, using your first-order preferences and your imaginative assessments. That's what we have to do. So I think this is a great line of thought here. It's clearly early days. There's such a lot to pursue down this line as to how to think lucidly about these big choices you make. Any questions about that? Yes, yes. I think the picture here is, it's taken me a long time to understand this. I had some help, but I'm not sure I've fully grasped it yet. But I think our picture is, if I want to do it objectively, what will have the highest subjective value for me, getting the durian or not eating the durian or not eating the durian, then I can rationally, scientifically, objectively give a high weight to the revelation. And that I just put in the scales, along with these other things about the probability of liking it or the probability of not liking it. Yeah. So that lets me choose rationally. Choosing imaginatively involves projecting into my post-bite world. Yeah. And finding some way to fill in the gap there, because I don't really know what the experience is going to be like. So you could try filling in the gap by just talking to a lot of people, reading those descriptions, trying to get a sense of it. I think that's the contrast. Does that seem? I tried explaining this earlier, and I made a hash of it. But I think my explanation now is better. Yeah. Okay, just briefly then, just while we're finishing. There's a question why imaginative understanding is so important. What is it about it that really matters? And I think the real answer that she wants to give is something to do with authenticity. And authenticity is obviously something that matters to all of us in everyday life. Whether this is really what you want, whether you're doing it because someone else thinks you should do it, or because you feel obliged or something like that. The idea of being in touch with your core when you make the choice, that's important. That's important to all of us in different forms. One picture as to why imagination matters is, as I said, that only imagination can give you access to particular experiences. I think that can't be the basic thing. That can't be the important thing here. It's a very important fact about imagination in general anyway, but it can't be the key thing, given that these choices often don't have to do just with your individual experiences. They have to do with what's going on around you. If you don't make choices about your future from your own personal point of view, and instead step back and attempt to map out choices based only on some sort of impartial, uncommitted third-personal point of view, you in effect cede authority over yourself. You're letting the decision be made by other people. This holds in two senses. It holds, first of all, if I just disregard my personal point of view, but I say that having a good diet, lots of healthy exercise, that's the way you should go, or whatever the experts say you should do with children, to have or not to have. That's the way I'll go. Well, in that sense, you've obviously given up authority over yourself. But she says, even if you factor in your own personal preferences and then put that in the scale along with all the data, that say the data shows people with your particular set of personal preferences usually do better by having children, or usually do better by not having children, then you've taken a third-person stance to yourself as if this just happens to be you that has got all those preferences, but all the scientific data spits out to have children or not to have children as the outcome. She says neither stance is appropriate for authentic, responsible decision-making, for neither stance incorporates the kind of first-personal commitment each of us makes when taking control of our lives and realizing the effects of our decisions. I think one way to get at what she wants here is, suppose we go right back to where we started in this, thinking about future pain that you might experience. If you're told the moment you step out of this room, you will be tortured horribly. I mean, you won't, but just suppose, right? Then that would be scary, right? That catches you. That catches your fear. And you don't usually think of just being frightened at the thought of future pain as an exercise in authenticity. But what I want to suggest is, it really is, that if you know, you're going to the dentist, you've elected not to have any anesthetic, but you feel it, you feel it in your stomach, this visceral fear, then what's going on there is that your imaginative understanding of the future state is grabbing your emotional responses in this direct way. It's not that you're relying on scientific data to tell you, well, you ought to be very, very afraid, so now I'm going to be afraid. You see what I mean? There's that kind of unmediated, unintellectualized aspect to your reaction to the situation. So what I'm suggesting is authenticity in that simple case comes in because when you imagine the future state, your emotional responses are being mobilized in a way that doesn't depend on you intellectually reflecting on what emotions you ought to feel or what emotions a person like you should feel. So if you imagine not having children or you imagine having children, then if you do it in this direct way, your emotional responses are being mobilized directly by the imaginative act itself. It's not that you think, oh, well, one ought to feel very positive about having children, or one ought to feel very positive about not having children, therefore I'm going to feel like that. Authenticity means that it's not an intellectualized response. You just imagine the future state, and then your emotions get mobilized. But just one last thought. Authenticity here, in that sense, is not an easy thing. Authenticity is often difficult. There's a really striking studies of when children start to talk, what are the first things they say? And among the first things that children say are lies. They tell lies designed to bolster their dignity. I mean, it's just amazing that 2-year-olds, well, among the first things they say will be things like, I meant to do that when they drop something, or I wanted that to happen. You see what I mean? These things are not true. And my point about that is, for all of us, people are pretty fancy. I mean, people are pretty sophisticated right from the word go. And there are many ways in which it's natural to us to lie. It's natural to us to have fake reactions. And getting an authentic reaction to a future situation, when you imagine a future situation, pain is a great example because it's very simple and clear and is easy. It's much easier than it is with most things to have an uncomplicated reaction. But your own implicit biases and so on, when you're imagining a future situation, to set all that aside and just have the authentic reaction is hard. Raymond Chandler, who wrote all these detective novels, said, honesty is an art. It's hard to be honest. And on that note, I will pack up and do remembering last time. Okay, thanks guys. Great questions.